Okay, good evening. I'm going to talk a little bit about my Illustrator project that I made for Imagine this year. My inspiration behind this, before I show you, it was mostly based on, or it was based on the fact that Gracie, Marie, and I are going to take a trip our senior year, going into our freshman year of college, to the northwestern side of the United States. And it's just a less expensive way to travel, and we just wanted to kind of get away, and we were just very excited to plan this. So I can start off by, oh, that's not it, showing you my very first step. Of course, you have to figure out your color palette, which was what I did for that. And I went through and I had to screenshot each place that we were planning to go on during our trip. And then I, of course, numbered them, and it took a lot of planning for sure. You had to go through each state that we wanted. We wanted to make sure we weren't spending too much time in one area or like the driving time. So we did cut out certain places, but I went through and numbered each place as it was. So you can kind of get an idea of what I'm talking about as I explain this. This is my final project that I submitted to Imagine, and as you can read, it's 2019 travel plans, 3 seniors in 1 summer. So this was one of the very first things that I did and actually redid. Was I image traced, especially the more harder states. And then I would go through and try to get as exact as I could to each place. And that's the thing about Illustrator, is I had done it before, but not to this extent. And I have a good friend of mine, which is Gracie, who is also going on this trip, who is really good with Illustrator, and I felt so overwhelmed by the fact of Illustrator and like actually diving into it that I never did it. And I'm so glad I did for this project, because I actually feel like I can accomplish stuff and like get stuff done in a timely manner and not just sit there and like wallow in my despair of not being able to do anything, or anything that's interesting at least. So this is what it looks like. It's an infographic. I don't think I said that. So it's giving kind of like insights into what the trip will look like. And so one of the very first things I made was each state's like logo, I guess, or like what they're most known for. And this was definitely the hardest part, like trying to figure out different ways, because most of them were just mountains that we were going to and like wilderness, except for Utah, obviously. And that was one of the first like building blocks I had to get over, the learning curve, I guess, especially 3D. That is a huge, like, it's way different. It wasn't too difficult, but it definitely makes you think outside of the box. And then just little things, like I learned how to do this in Illustrator, and I can kind of show you maybe how to do that a little. But yeah, I calculated all the miles. I found my 2 fonts that would be put on here. I pretty much made every single piece of this work of art, which I think is pretty neat. I'm pretty proud. I think the most difficult part was the spacing, because Illustrator, it gives you some flexibility to like find the center of things, but not always like on your artboard where to find like where things line up. If you're used to Word or Pages, like they give you lines that helps you with. But Illustrator, it's pretty much a blank canvas that you have some like direction for, but not totally. So that is probably one of the most frustrating parts, when you really are trying to get everything so detailed. And you can if you really try, it just takes a lot of time. So that was definitely something. Pretty much like this was new for me, like shading things, having to go in with a pencil tool and make everything, take an image and then like transpire that image so that you can get the exact shadows that were on that image, and then erase the image and use yours that you found. There's all sorts of things. This was just basically like me reteaching myself Illustrator, but it was super fun. Definitely a lot of the keystrokes I still try to use in daily life, and you don't always have to use that because Illustrator is a pain sometimes. So, but it's become a habit because I work so hard on this. I can go into each part. This was one I didn't save many of my progresses because they all saved over top of each other, which was kind of silly of me. But like this was one of the titles that I had created, which I didn't like. This was another one. And then here's where it got a little messy. It was very clean, let me say that. But once you start working on like your final artboard, you do not really care what your other artboards look like, especially if you're not going to do anything with them and you're just using them. But originally my first one was going to be like this, and I was going to have the United States in the center, or like the states I was going to, and I was going to have them branching out. But I definitely am very happy with the direction that I went with it. I think it's laid out a lot more. And it's not just creating the different things, it's like thinking how there's so many different ways that I could have done this, and you have to picture how it would look the best, because you can't just do it how you can't just see how it looks. It would take so long to change every little aspect of it, and when you're not given that much amount of time, it's hard to do that. Oh, another thing that was a hard battle was clipping masks. It's amazing how frustrating those little things can be, especially when you're dealing with outlines like I was constantly. But I overcame it, and I'm pretty confident in my clipping mask skills now. And layers. As you can see, I have many layers and like layers in layers. Like I said, it was very organized, but by the end I was just kind of moving it until I thought that it was in the right place. So that's what happens when, you're just trying to get the final product how you want. And for me, it's a new concept of not caring as much about your organization, but you care about the final product the most. This was actually something that I image traced, and then I just used it kind of as a template to make my own. Like, I made this in my own shape builder, but I use this as like kind of a guide because there's so many different suns you can make, and that was just an example of something I did. Also, like image tracing and finding different image trace, because this is actually considered a technical drawing and not an image trace, but I won't get into all the nitty gritty because that gets kind of boring. But I definitely enjoyed this a lot. It was super fun, and I felt like productive while I was doing something that I enjoyed. So let's see if there's anything else. These were just examples of like the states that I had made, and as you can see, the outline is somewhere in here. All the tools I was getting reacquainted with, but it was definitely a fun time. Once I got past the biggest like hurdles, then it was so much fun. Let's see. I obviously used Illustrator, as you can tell. I was just very proud with like my ability to problem solve, I guess. And I used my friends for sure, but there was so many layers to this project. As there is any infographic, you have to do your research, and I didn't have to do as much research. It was more about like my own information gathering. But I'm just overall, like I've never actually been, I don't know if I should say this, but like proud of a project, and this one definitely isn't perfect, but it's something that I feel like is the most mature, I guess, or like most something that I'd be willing to show people or be like, look what I did. Then again, it's easier to perfect like an infographic than a movie or something like that. Yeah, it was just an enjoyable project, and I hope to do more Illustrator projects, but there's so many things that can go into it, and I feel like I've pretty much grasped most of Vision Tech. Okay, I think that's it. So thanks for listening to me ramble on, and I hope you enjoyed my infographic for Imagine 2018.